Hello and welcome to today's episode of Leading Tourism's Transition. I'm really excited to be joined by people I think I can call friends. Apparently, we've known each other for more than 10 years. So it's really a great privilege to have today's guest on the show. And just to give a quick introduction, I'm Nick Hall. I'm the founder and CEO of the Digital Tourism Think Tank. And today, we have the privilege of connecting with one of our academia members. Here at the DTTT, we work with many universities all across Europe, and we have very different relationships with each. And it's always really insightful to see how they work both in teaching, but also how they work together with industry. So today, we're going to do a little bit of both. I'm really excited to be joined by the team from Lapland University of Applied Sciences. Now, before I introduce them, I will give the warning. I'm not going to try and extend my Finnish to pronouncing all of your last names. I will let you correct me on that and introduce yourselves fully. But before we get started, we're going to just have a quick round. So we've got Outi here, Petra and Päivi, who we work with very closely at the DTTT. They all play different roles in putting together a really eclectic program of learning, but also applied work with industry and some really insightful research, all of which we're going to dip into today. So I'd like to kick off and invite each of you to just tell us a little bit about what you do, and then we'll jump into the conversation and start to deep dive on some of those topics. So perhaps I can start with you, Outi.
Okay, thanks, Nick. Great to be here. Thanks for the invitation. My name is Outi Kähkönen, and I work in the tourism department of the Lapland University of Applied Sciences here in Finnish Lapland, right at the Arctic Circle. I teach mainly digital marketing, and I'm at the moment working together with my colleagues at a project called Artificial Intelligence in Support of Tourism Sales and Marketing Processes. And there I'm especially responsible for the project communications, and there I'm really eagerly experimenting with all different types of AI tools, because we are all in the process of learning AI. It's evolving all the time, and what wasn't possible half a year ago, you can now do. We are learning all the time.
Yeah, we're going to discuss AI a lot today, I think. So I'm really looking forward to unpacking everything that you've been exploring there. Just before we started today's recording, we were talking about Notebook LM. I think it's certainly a favorite in both of our teams. So I'm really looking forward to deep diving on that. Petra, tell us about yourself.
Hello, thanks for the invitation. So my name is Petra Paloniemi, and I'm Outi's colleague, and here I represent same project that Outi was just mentioning, but also I'm in a project called regenerative tourism. So that is also one of my topics which I teach. So sustainable regenerative tourism and also digitalization in marketing. And I'm almost finishing my PhD also, and it's related to technologies of hospitality.
Great, fantastic. Certainly, we'll be hearing a lot about how you're working with some of the hospitality businesses and to really get underneath the skin of what they're actually doing and how they're working with technology, or maybe struggling to. I'm curious to hear from you. Päivi, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Nick, and it's so lovely to be here. My name is Päivi Hanni-Vaara, and I'm also part of this AI project. I'm a third person or expert in it. And I'm a senior lecturer at tourism degree or in the international degree. And mostly I do my work with R&D, research and development projects, where we collaborate a lot with the local companies or the regional companies in Lapland. And I also love to bring those cases into teaching. I'm teaching at the bachelor degree, collaborative customer experience and digital marketing. And quite recently, I started also at master's, which is about digital ecosystems and how to form networks and value chains or value within networks. This is about me mostly at the moment, but I need to add as well that I'm also finalizing my PhD, which is about empathy in digital interaction.
This sounds really interesting. So maybe we'll touch on some of that, especially in the first part of today's discussion where we're going to look at design thinking. But fantastic to hear a bit more about what each of you do. And I love the fact that this is continual learning as well, both in the work we do and perhaps the areas in which we want to understand better, as technology is always evolving very rapidly. And it is never just about the technology. It's about the interactions. It's about the human aspect that we bring to that. And of course, it's about strategy and where those opportunities present themselves. So I think the good place to start today is with design thinking. It's something that we here at the Digital Tourism Think Tank have always worked with since really very early on. And we've really, over time, started to understand the value of human-centered design when working with technology. And sometimes it can seem very separated from technology, but actually it sits right at the heart of that. Now, I know that you've integrated and built design thinking into your teaching, into your programs. So tell us a little bit about, who would like to jump in first and tell us a little bit about what that looks like and how that actually comes together in practice. So I see Petra waving your hand there. Go on, tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, actually, I've been working for, let's say, for a decade in a project. It actually started as a European Union funded project with Kempten UAS from Germany and Petra UAS from the Netherlands. And we have been keeping doing this cooperation and still going on. And actually this spring, I'm one of the responsible teachers here at Lapland UAS to organize an intensive course to our students, but also students coming from those universities of applied sciences. And every year we use design thinking method in this study unit or course. And we follow the design thinking method by Liedtke and Brown. And it includes phases like empathizing, defining, ideating, prototyping, and testing. And actually, the kickoff will be very soon in 2 or 3 weeks. And in the kickoff, we present the idea, the task to our students. And actually, this year, the task is to develop regenerative luxury tourism concepts for international target groups in tourism, for luxury tourism companies here in Finnish Lapland. So actually that development work goes directly to real companies here in Lapland. And the actual intensive week here in Lapland will be in 2 months. So first, we give them tasks to do in their home universities, but in international teams. So for example, they all study that what is actually regenerative luxury tourism, what is design thinking, what is innovating, etc. We have lectures online, what they study. And then they actually have also some quizzes or something. So we a little bit test that they all have got similar kind of a level when they start the actual ideating phase of design thinking. Also, because we want that they go very deep to understand customers. This year, we ask them all to do at least 2 interviews of the target groups. So they have to have a chat with representatives of the target groups. This also comes from the companies because they are really interested about the real values of these people who are dreaming of trip to come to Lapland and dream holiday like regenerative tourism, sustainable tourism, and what are those people actually thinking? What do they want, etc. So this is one part where we are including in this empathizing phase of design thinking process.
Design thinking is so important today. And actually what we see generally is, especially for SMEs, it's something that's very difficult to take on board because sometimes the best design thinking involves a lot of people. You build a diverse team that represents different perspectives. You have to organize sessions that need to be facilitated. You need to have a design plan. And then you need to identify as you go how you're going to challenge some of your assumptions. This is also something that's really core to design thinking. How would you say that process is working with businesses and also the students themselves? How do they get into that? And what are some of the challenges or perhaps some of the really fast learning curves that you've seen in that process?
Yeah, and I think it happens especially when we are having the intensive week. We always say to students that trust the process because we really follow the process. And I think at some point they might feel a bit insecure that what is this all about and how is this going to work? So we just say trust the process because we have noticed in these years that it really works. And there are these different kind of moments because these are also multicultural groups. There might be challenges related to that, different kind of working methods and etc. There are of course challenges on the way, but we have felt that every year this has been really a success. And at the end, the ideas have been amazing and the companies have been very happy with the results. The students have been also like producing.
Brilliant. I think there's two ways we look at design thinking. I think the first is, as you said, the process. If you follow it from defining the challenge all the way to prototyping and then building, then you really have an end-to-end, highly strategic approach to solving a problem and then exploring how you might address that and then building prototypes. On the other hand, I think especially it's relevant from a teaching perspective because you want those students to go out and to have career opportunities and have successful careers. It's also about the specific individual skills that you learn through the process. So it's twofold. I completely understand what you say about trusting the process because when we run design thinking sessions, maybe with industry, we see sometimes skepticism, especially within the first half of that process. They don't always see the quick results and they may be often used to people teaching to them and telling them what to do. So it can often seem maybe like a waste of time, but at a certain point, you start to turn a corner. And so the points that I love in design thinking is when you've correctly framed your challenge. This is, I guess, something you've probably seen quite a lot.
Yeah.
Is the way we describe a challenge and the way we frame the challenge are not at all the same things. But also, when you start to develop hundreds, if not even thousands of ideas, tell us about that idea part, because I guess this is where, for a really diverse array of students working on something like this, you really have those young minds that can bring a lot of creative thinking and process. Is this for you also one of the most rewarding parts? And do you start to see the businesses getting engaged at that point?
Yeah, for sure. So we actually give them some techniques how to create innovations. And one is, of course, that create at least 100 new ideas. We say that they have to be a bit of fool, just let it go and create ideas and ideas. And I agree with you that it comes only later that you are choosing that what is really realistic, etc. But yes, this is very fun, I think, for the students as well.
Fantastic. Yeah, Päivi, I think you've got some thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, those are really interesting points you are pointing out. Nick, you were telling that the companies are willing to have the conclusions really quickly. It's the same with students. They are really eager to know what is the commission, what are we supposed to do? And they don't have that energy to concentrate, for example, to build a project team, to represent themselves, who they are, what is their motivation, what are their expectations for the study, for example. And afterwards, when they know that the commission, of course, it is important, but we humans are doing the service design, for example, or experience design. So we need to get to know each other first. It's like a team play. We need to know and use everybody's strengths there. And it would be really beneficial for companies also to think that they need to include this in their strategies, that there are no speed contests with finding solutions. But when they have this in their strategy, it's an ongoing process all the time, like behind the scenes. And they find solutions like coming out throughout the collaboration inside the company and also in ecosystems.
Yeah, that's really great. And I think you're really providing something that they cannot do alone. It's very difficult if you're a 1 or 2 person business because you need more people involved in that process in order to start creating and observing and also looking at the business from different perspectives. I think it's fantastic. And I think this leads us really nicely then to the second part of what we wanted to discuss today. By the way, I'd love to come back to some of what we just talked about and see what your opinion is on AI in the design thinking process, because I think certainly for me, I've seen that the way we have always done design thinking is radically going to change for certain parts of that because of what AI can do. We'll talk about that later on when we talk about AI. But tell us a bit about the e-hospitality project, because this is really where I think being at University of Applied Sciences starts to demonstrate its value and starts to demonstrate the kind of value creation you're building between industry and within teaching as well.
So if I may continue, the spark of e-hospitality actually was born in 2010. It was the time when I was doing my master's and I wanted to do my study for thesis about forms and volumes of technology, electronic technology, how companies are doing that. And it's also funny to follow these concepts, what we are discussing. Nowadays, we are talking about digital transformation, but at that time, it was electronic hospitality, mainly we were discussing about. I did my master's, and then in 2020, my supervisor was contacting me from southern Finland and asked that, Päivi, what should we do now when the e-hospitality has been quite somewhere, not on the top at the moment, because of these high-tech innovations. And they were coming in that strongly that the human was vanished. And that's the point where we started to think that maybe this is a good and reasonable issue or element now to start to do some work and research as well. We were easy to join with my supervisor because Petra and we had started our PhDs just recently, a couple of years ago before that. And Petra was studying the value creation and value co-creation in digital platforms. And I was eager to study this empathy and empathic digital encountering. What does it mean from human perspective? And what's the role of the non-humans, meaning the technology here, for example? This is the way how it started. And then we formed a collaborative group from southern Finland. We actually had two similar kind of digital hospitality projects going on or seeking money, funding. And we got the fundings and we started a marvelous collaboration with those. So the whole Finland was actually covered for digital hospitality.
Fantastic. I love how you describe the non-humans as well. So we're definitely looking at this through two perspectives. So in practice, What did that mean for those businesses? How did they engage and benefit from this program? What are the sort of examples of needs and initiatives?
That's a really important question, because without companies and without collaboration, we wouldn't be nothing. So we actually did collaborate a lot with companies and still are with some of them because of these values, what they found out through collaboration. And using that pedagogy, what Petra was explaining, is one key element in this collaboration. So we talk about experiments and we are eager to experiment. So we are not always ready what is going to happen in this process. But we should adjust ourselves that something else might happen what we have planned, and that's okay. Then we go with the flow. And of course we have plans. We have planned and we have ideations, and then we do this process as it's planned. For example, there is one local heritage museum that we have collaborated a lot. We did a two-method research with them using eye tracking technology and empathy map to activate the museum visitors to collect data of their museum experiences, and then analyzed that and then formed findings and presented the findings for the museum. And since they have renewed their on-site service, which includes some sparks of technology as well. Another case is about tourism destination, very active tourism and wonderful destination in Lapland. And they wanted to explore their customers' online behavior. So we found out that there is a Hotjar tool we could use to collect the online visitors' data and how they behave. What are their interests? How do they go their customer journey online? And at which spot they turn out from the page.
Yeah.
The students were the one to analyze the data and then form findings. And we experts from the project were the ones to coach them in the project based on this design thinking process. They were very happy. By the way, the destination is owned by private and public organizations. So this is also important that we collaborate with associations, with companies, and also municipalities, for example. Our students were so brave and so wise that they found several elements and issues they should develop on their web pages based on the behavior what they analyzed. These two examples are just two examples, and there are plenty of others as well.
Yeah, what you're really highlighting is that we often look at tourism and the many SMEs that make up the tourism industry as businesses which maybe lack skills, lack time, don't always have wide or broad strategic view. They have to focus on their day-to-day operations. And these are, of course, realities that perhaps we can't solve directly within the businesses, because when you have those pressures and limited resources, your priorities do change as a result. But I think what you're really highlighting here is that in this sense, this kind of partnership can really help to bring in additional skills, additional strategic support without the enormous cost investment that perhaps a large multinational enterprise would have the ability to make. And I really love the fact that you've also used the design thinking aspect, which allows them to have that highly strategic view, well-informed view through that process and move away from making assumptions, but also the access and the use of very high-end technologies wherever you think they could allow you to better understand a certain part of the process. And we're going to move on to AI soon. And of course, as we look at AI, these types of technologies which give us a better understanding just keep transforming every single day. So I think this is really fantastic. And what would a typical time span look like to work with a business, and how many people would be involved in that process? Because what you've described is still quite a lot of work. We've done things like that ourselves, and it does require quite a lot of time and commitment as well.
Thank you for your words, Nick. If I may add a bit, there are so many hidden competencies, what we learn and what kind of value we get from this collaboration. It's not only for us, it's mainly for students as well. It's for the companies or the representatives outside academia. And we can show that though we are so few here living in the region, together we can do whatever. So that's the attitude what we are like having here.
Yeah, and I think you've shown the success of that as well. I'd love to now explore AI because, to be completely honest, it's what we've seen here at the Digital Tourism Think Tank. This is all anybody is thinking about right now. Whether it's a macro industry level, we're talking about how AI is transforming the visitor journey and how AI is transforming and opening up new opportunities and what those look like. But also at a very granular level, we see different examples every day of how businesses, also public sector organizations, are using AI or trying to use AI to improve their operational efficiency. And we also have seen ourselves a huge gap between what we perhaps assume is the level at which most people are working with AI and the reality, especially when we look across the tourism industry. And so we see there's still a huge amount of work to do. The irony of it is, if you survey a room of people, perhaps SMEs, even people in larger organizations, you will invariably find that 99 out of 100 are using ChatGPT on a weekly basis. But then when you start to observe and look at how they use these tools, you start to realize that they're often used at a very minimal or basic level. And so that enormous potential that sits within even the mainstream AI tools, the LLMs, is largely untapped. Is that something that you've seen? And maybe tell us a bit about what your research has revealed.
Okay, you already took quite a few of my words, I must
Sorry
say.
about that.
Because that's exactly our research target group were sized or small businesses in Lapland, because that's how tourism and hospitality companies are in Lapland. So the CEO of the company can be the lead guide and the cleaner at the same time. Certainly, they have lots and lots of obligations, not just learning how to use AI, but AI comes on top of all the things that they need to do. And if I mention some of the findings from our research, there were semi-structured interviews or surveys, and I also visited the International Travel Fair last week in Helsinki, where I interviewed further marketing personnel of these companies. Then it is true that it's ChatGPT. Very often, even if it's a company, it's the free version, and they didn't even know about deep research. So they are using AI for translations, of course. That's super important because we have native speakers actually working there at the company. So for making the emails sound like not so blunt as the Finnish way of a conversation goes, making them sound polite in the English way. That was one thing where they used it a lot. But then just ideating, brainstorming, creating product cards and such. So for basic writing, but they always emphasize that they never accept the result as it is, but they always edit it. And there was the fear that the company loses its tone of voice, how authentic it is, and especially in connection with AI images. They were saying that our beautiful nature, it doesn't need AI filter. We want to be authentic. So there was also a lot of criticism and not trusting AI, the hallucinations, the biases it offers. But yes, AI is a very eager and capable intern that you need to give proper instructions, so good prompting, and it can take care of the tedious tasks, the repeating tasks. The companies, they want to free their time to serving face-to-face situations, meeting people with empathy and emotional intelligence. That's what was important.
It's interesting to see, especially translation coming up as one of the strongest things. We've done a lot of work with AI, also quite a lot in English-speaking countries. And so this isn't something that comes up. We actually often talk about it ourselves. And if you're an English-speaking country, you normally have the luxury, even if you work across multiple markets, of other people speaking to you in English. So it's really interesting to see that from a completely different perspective. Many Finns are also very comfortable and competent in English. So you could also look at other countries where actually the level of English is much lower than, say, in Finland. But of course, there's a very different thing from being comfortable having the conversation we're having. And then, as you say, culturally adapting. And I love the fact that you mentioned this politeness. It is true that English speakers, especially British English speakers, have a certain soft and polite way of saying things. But on the other hand, if something isn't soft and polite, they can be instantly offended and shocked if something is said very directly. And so in a business environment, there is an accidental risk of saying something very directly and then upsetting a customer, which might then in turn lead to a cancellation, someone not completing a booking, or a bad review. So none of those any business wants to have to deal with, especially for a misunderstanding. There's also audio translation tools. Google Meet are now introducing live translations. So it's really exciting to see just in this one area how many new opportunities are being unlocked. When you look at the businesses that you've surveyed and understood, what would you say is the biggest opportunity for them? As you mentioned, they might be the cleaner and the guide at the same time. So I think one of the things I see is that they don't actually spend a lot of time in front of a computer. Even invoicing sometimes is done with a mobile app and it's fired off as a sort of text message or a WhatsApp invoice with a payment link. So sometimes it's maybe harder, if I'm just putting myself into my shoes, to see how you get the most out of AI because, as you said, often you aren't able to accept what you get from AI and you have to take that task back yourself and complete it. So that often requires sitting in front of a computer and going backwards and forwards 20 times before you say, okay, this is quite good, I'm going to finish it myself. I guess if you don't spend that time in an office at a desk, that makes it a little bit harder, although all of the LMs do have their apps as well.
Yeah, that didn't actually come up in the interviews, but we really don't know how the future will be in 2-3 years time, because ChatGPT has been around only for a little bit over 3 years and the world has changed completely from our viewpoint, at least. I believe that in near future AI will be seamlessly integrated into all the processes. So now we are just conducting these separate experiments, but how to make it work throughout the process in the background, or maybe even in customer contact through chatbots, so that we know how to use it and what are its shortcomings and where we can then put our save time. This is still yet to come. And even in education, we are only taking the first steps, really, because we teachers need to learn how to use AI. And of course, it's always generative AI that we are speaking about here. And then often we also expect the students to know more, because in my digital marketing classes, there are always students who have refused to use AI, very often for ethical reasons. It uses so much electricity, which it's a very noble thought. And then they are using AI as a search engine, very often failing to see the hallucinations, for example. We start from quite the basics with them, how to write good prompts and how to then judge the outcome and how to make it better. And of course, we are teaching HubSpot, for example, and there are AI capabilities, but we are only observing that it can be used, but certainly not all the way through. And I must say that in education, the biggest concern now is also in some of the interviews, it was a great concern that we are losing our own skills in thinking and writing, because we ask ChatGPT everything and without thinking. So how to make our students think, still teach them to use AI.
Exactly. I think this presents very many quite difficult challenges in education, because AI is not going away. So we can't block it out or say don't use it. We now work with AI, and that isn't only thinking and exploring, that is also writing and framing our ideas. And there's not a very clear line then between when an idea is formed by us or with AI. This is certainly a challenge that we have to keep understanding better. And it's interesting to hear as well the need to also just develop and make sure that in a student environment that those basic skills, how to really use AI effectively, are also understood. Maybe we make a lot of assumptions. We often say young people are the first to adopt different technologies, but I think AI and experience together is an interesting mix that we haven't had to face with previous technologies. I know that, Päivi, you've been trying to jump in and say something. So tell us what your perspective is on all of this.
Thank you. I'm a bit eager, sorry. I would like to point out also the business ethics, how to implement AI, what are the rules and regulations, how to use it. It comes also for companies and students and our own behavior. What we found out when we collaborate with companies, and they are micros here mainly, we also always need to come up to the problem, the key problem, what they have, and try to find solutions through discussions and ideations. Where to focus now, what will help you in your operation at the moment. So it doesn't have to be on strategical level. It also can be very operational, depending on the size, depending on the hours to spend. And we are telling the companies here in the region that we are a resource for you. Please collaborate with us, use us as resources, because we need you to convince that we are here for the society. So it's once again the co-creation and collaboration, doing together. And by the way, last year in March, I had a study unit where I integrated this AI topic. I would say that 80% of the students in tourism and hospitality hadn't tried AI yet at that moment. So it was really new for nearly all of us, also for us teachers. And it was an experimental kind of project what we went through, and it was really handy, and we were learning a lot together, we teachers as well.
Wow. That's a very interesting perspective. As I say many times, we make a lot of assumptions. Perhaps we need to test and challenge those assumptions. Petra, with all the design thinking work, this is something you certainly know about. I have to be honest, we often ourselves forget to go back to those principles. Sometimes when a technology is applying so much pressure, we don't feel like we have time to step back and follow the process. But we talked earlier about AI in something like design thinking. We collect a lot of information in a design thinking process. We also contribute a lot of information. And then we also have things like observing and prototyping. So I see a lot of opportunities here for AI, but tell us how you see AI changing something like design thinking, which is traditionally almost no device involved with most of the design thinking process. It's pens, it's stickies, it's ideas, and it's conversations. So tell us how you see that maybe changing.
Yeah, I agree with you that it's a big change. And actually, last year I noticed that when we were in Germany doing this course, I noticed the students were actually using quite a lot of AI, especially when creating ideas. And of course, actually, I have to say that we were not sure how to react to that. But I think in future we have to include AI somehow to the process. But this is something that we are, as teachers, we are also learning all the time. And this is something that we really have to think about. I think when I'm talking about this empathizing phase and when students are studying now before the intensive week, like we had a meeting yesterday and we were quite a lot of concentrating that how easy it is actually for the students to do the quizzes with AI, how to prevent that and how to create that kind of assignments that they cannot really do it just with AI. So for example, one assignment is a group discussion that they have to record. That's what we have been thinking most. But I think as in our studies otherwise as well, our students can use AI, so it's not forbidden, but they just have to use it in a way, in a correct way, in a way that we have given them instructions. And this is actually, we create a manual and we have also written those rules in our manual as well, also for that course where we use design thinking. But this is a very good point and very good discussion. And I think as an international teacher team, we have to discuss this even more, how much we actually allow and encourage our students to use this.
Fantastic. I can already tell you what we do with designing. We digitize everything. So we keep it human. We handwrite everything and we photograph it, feed it into AI. Synthesize those thoughts. And that process is really incredible because it's doing something that's very time consuming and laborious. And AI is able to find things amongst all of those ideas that perhaps you can easily overlook. And then throughout that process, all the conversations we have, recording those, transcribing them and digging deep. I think this is also something that is at very least a time saver and possibly allowing us to find things that we don't necessarily spot in conversations. And then the last way in which we really started to use this in the design thinking process is prototyping. It's so quick. This is actually one of the areas we found most challenging, is how do you design a concept or an idea? This is usually where we found the design thinking falls apart because it's a really challenging part of the process. But now you can design very easily, whether it's an illustration or whether it's even a prototype website. And so I think this really enables us to build and to move things forward in a way that we haven't before. Like you, we definitely have to monitor it, but I think we've gone from thinking maybe AI kills design thinking because you can ideate with AI and so on and so forth. But actually, it seems to add a lot more elements to the design thinking process, rather than actually kill it. And of course, AI itself requires a design thinking process. Otherwise, we're likely simply to run after things because they've got AI written on them, which is not the right way to do things. Well, it's been really brilliant having this very varied and dynamic conversation with all of you. We have time. I want to take this moment to thank all of you. Outi, Petra, Päivi, it's been really brilliant hearing from you. And I hope we'll have many opportunities in the future to continue and maybe deep dive on some of these individual elements that we spoke about. Any closing thoughts? What do you think the industry has to be mindful of to stay on top of the game in the future? This will be a nice way to close off the conversation, hear what each of you think. So perhaps I'll end how I started and head over to Outi first and see what your thoughts are.
On the basis of our research, I would raise the idea that let the machine handle all the misery, and then you can concentrate on the important things like human connection.
I like that very much. And how about for you, Petra?
We have to face the reality. And at the moment, AI is playing a very important role. And we just have to, how could I say, use all the opportunities AI can offer to us for innovation, for businesses.
I like that. We should see it as a gift. There's a lot that we didn't have a year ago, 2 years ago, and this is amazing. Fantastic. And Päivi, what's your thoughts?
I see that this fundamental change is bringing the non-humans even closer to us. It's going to be within a few years that we don't even recognize who is the one we are encountering with. We are talking about this emotional AI, which is coming, but I have to admit that I still agree with the neuroscience researchers that it has a way to go. But according to my PhD research, there are certain cognitive empathy elements included already in the AI, while they are acting like we humans have programmed them to act with humans. So this is reflected to cognitive empathy to walk the journey in others' shoes. So they are capable in recognizing that, but I'm not sure if they think or understand what they are programmed. But the time is coming that the emotional part is somehow more included, and there is a lot of research already done for that. However, we humans need to read this. We won't let the machines run over.
That's a really strong point to end on. Quite a lot for us to think about. We should always remember that AI is trained. It's taught certain behaviors, certain responses, certain creative styles and approaches, even ways of expressing empathy. But of course, humanity is not programmed, and creativity is in itself thinking from a completely different perspective or something new to that. And this is certainly the risk that all of you have touched on in different ways. And we need to make sure that whether it's expertise or whether it's creative thinking, we don't lose sight of that and we don't fully put our trust in AI, remembering that AI is still a trained model. So that's a really great point to end on. Outi, Petra, Päivi, thank you so much. It's been great connecting with you, and we'll certainly be continuing this conversation. Thanks a lot for joining today.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you, colleagues.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nick.